art will somehow manifest itself in a way that is still fascinating in every generation. The reason why we resonate with it so much now is because it's totally of our time. You know, when we look at a 19th century work or a work from the Renaissance, even though it's technically brilliant, it's in some ways it's not speaking our language because it's not our day to day.
Welcome to the Creative Endeavor Podcast. This is the podcast bringing you inspiring stories from creative professionals from around the world. It's real conversations with real artists. And I'm Andrew Tischler. Thank you so much for stopping by the studio. I've got a great episode to share with you today. In this episode, I'm talking to Michael Klein, who's an artist based in Massachusetts in the United States. Now, Michael's actually somebody that I reached out to way back in the day when I first started this podcast. And for several reasons, we just couldn't make it work back then, all those years ago, back in 2018. But I'm so glad that we had this opportunity to connect now. And we had so much to catch up on. Now, Michael creates some beautiful paintings, landscape, figurative portraits, and some exquisite floral pieces. His work is traditional, but unique. And I just love the way he layers that oil paint to create real body dimension and three-dimensionality. But his paintings just feel so real. When you're looking at them, you're having an experience, but at the same time, they maintain that painterly quality. As a painter myself, every time I look at his work, I just totally geek out and fall in love with painting all over again. So it's wonderful to have this opportunity to talk to somebody like Michael and pick his brain, not only on the painting side of things, but also to hear about his creative journey. Here, Michael was an open book, and he told me all about those early beginnings and how he got started and some of the exciting things that he's working on today, and some of those exciting projects that he's a big part of, like the new Salem Museum and Academy of Fine Art. This was a really exciting project and an opportunity not only for Michael, but for artists all around the world. Now, if you're not already following Michael on Instagram, change that quick. Follow him at Michael Klein Paintings. That last name is spelled K-L-E-I-N. It's at Michael Klein Paintings and at www.michaelkleinpaintings.com. Check out his exquisite work there, and that'll give you some context, if you're not already following him, behind the person you're about to hear from. All right, I'm going to step out of the way, bring him on. Here's Michael Klein and the Creative Endeavor. Michael Klein, welcome to the Creative Endeavor Podcast. This has been a long time coming. I'm just so glad to finally have this chance to talk with you face to face, even if it's digitally.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Look, there's so many things that I want to dive into, and I'm really excited about this opportunity to geek out with you about painting, because I've got a bunch of technical stuff I want to ask you. I want to talk to you, of course, about the new Salem Museum. But let's just kick things off, Michael. I love starting things this way, and just hear a bit about your personal story, because you've accomplished quite a lot in your career. And technically, when you look at your impressive body of work and just the quality of your art, and just how good the paintings are, they're just so good. I just really want to hear that story about how this all began. Where did your painting journey start? Can you take us back to those moments where you were like, far out, I want to be an artist when I grow up?
Sure, absolutely. Andrew, I just have to say this is a huge honor to be here. I've followed you for a long time, and so this is exciting.
Oh.
Yeah, so basically, like everybody, a typical journey of understanding that you have a natural gift, and that leads you to do certain things when you're a child. It wasn't until later on, as I kind of developed and realized that it was looking less likely that I was going to be like a doctor or my father was a dentist, and so it was definitely some bar that was kind of unspoken in our family. But I just knew that it was like the doors were shutting as I kept getting older. But I always had this gift of the arts, and so I pressed into it really hard in late teens. Um, I grew up in the Midwest in a small town, so for me it was an opportunity to kind of see a vision out, get out of the situation I was in, and potentially be successful. And so that led to a variety of different things, which we can discuss.
Yeah. So were you one of those weird kids that drew in class and was a bit of a loner as well?
Absolutely. I mean, you just look at me. No, no, yeah, totally.
It takes one to know one, buddy.
Yeah, right. No, I got funny stories, childhood stories, but I'll save it for another time.
Oh, no, no, please.
Yeah,
No, no.
definitely artistic oriented, just did weird stuff,
Yeah.
super kind of, eccentric. I skateboarded a lot when I was younger, and I uh, I partied way too much. But even younger than that, the artistic kind of inclinations of just weird stuff,
Mm.
that's how it was.
Interesting the way you put that about doors closing as you kind of get older and that awareness starts to grow. Like I remember a very similar moment when I was coming up and I just felt one thing after another. And in fact, yeah, my father he was an artist, but he took a brief break from art, and he was an exhibits designer, and then he was working, at the Perth Zoo, and he was basically leaning on his architecture background. And I was thinking that
Okay.
during that period, oh, I want to do architecture like my dad. But I mean, it's interesting how you said that, because I saw those architecture doors closing on me. And I was thinking,
Mm,
I don't want to
mm,
do this until that art door flung wide open. So
sure.
with your story, like what was that moment like then when you're like, okay, shoot, this is actually the path here. This is what I want to do. Take us through those first steps on your road to
Yeah,
becoming a
yeah,
professional
yeah.
artist.
Absolutely. So when basically in high school, when things were going downhill in other ways, I saw an American Artist Catalog magazine on the desk of our art class, and it had the Madame X by Sargent on the cover, which was phenomenal. I'd never seen anything like that in my life, and it was an issue on portraiture. And in the issue, it kind of went through different portrait artists and stated what they were selling their portraits for. And it was just like, it was this really weird kind of aha moment as a young kid. I was like, I could do that. It was like, that was the first time where like the light bulb clicked. I was like, if these guys are making this amount of money, I'm going to do that. And literally it was like overnight, I applied to some scholarships at the American Academy of Art in Chicago and Savannah College of Art and Design. And I ended up winning both of them, which is super strange, but it happened. I won both of those, and then I turned it down because I wanted to go the path of just painting and drawing. So my parents were like all confused because it was like, you know,
Mm.
kind of being academically not I was all over the place. So uh, they were like, "Great, he got scholarships. This is wonderful." And I was like, "No, no, no. I don't want that. I just want to paint and draw." And so at the time, the internet was just kind of starting, and there was a school in Minnesota that was dedicated. It wasn't an atelier, but it was in the vein of the ateliers. So it was someone who had wanted to study with an artist named Richard Lack, and
Oh yeah.
she opened up her own school. And so right away, when I was 18 years old, I got thrown into that world, and it's obviously that's what my life has been about. I'm turning 44 this summer, and it's been all that. It literally, like, this whole time, it's just been in that world, like, you know. So yeah, we can talk about it.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So this passion for art, it sounds like it really took over. And so at what point were you able to make it work as a business? I imagine like when you first start out, did you have to have some way of supporting yourself as you were doing this, or was the commercial success almost immediate where you're like, okay, you start accumulating
Yeah.
those wins, you're able to sustain
Mhm.
yourself. How did that look?
Yeah, no, it wasn't immediate. It was definitely like while I studied, I was in school for almost 7 years. And because I went to three different kind of atelier school. And so that meant I started over a couple times. And so I had to work some oddball jobs, but also my parents did give me a hand with at least rent. That was like, that was one of the things that like they weren't going to put me on the street. Um, and I needed to focus on the art. So that was, but when I got engaged to my wife, I was 23. And from that moment on, I didn't take another penny from my parents because I was like, I got to do this. If it's going to work, I got to pay for, the family, etc.
Mhm.
So I started selling paintings out of my apartment at a gallery in New York City. That was like, it was called the Art Student Showcase. And it was just like $300, $500. And I sold everything. So, and then I eventually, you talked about kind of that wouldn't pay the bills. So when I was offered a solo show with Arcadia, I was 25, and I jumped ship and I moved to Argentina with my wife because I knew we could build and afford uh, life down there because it was dirt cheap. It was dirt cheap,
Mhm.
and that was my business strategy, and it worked because it was just enough to get me over the hump at that early age.
Wow, I really want to circle back to that. That's super interesting. That's super
Yeah.
interesting. Okay, so wow, wow. So Arcadia's a gallery that's been on my radar for well over a decade now. And
Excellent.
I gotta say this, like looking at kind of following what's happening in the US, it sometimes it felt like a really good party that was happening over there. And I was just like, oh man, I want to hang out with those guys so bad, you know? Um, and it just seems like the painting and the quality, like there seems to be this resonance that's happening now. And the quality is just getting better and better and better. And
Mm,
I don't know about you. I've said this to my students on the academy. Like I think some of the best painting that's ever been done. Yeah, I don't know how people feel about this, but I think some of the best painting that's ever been done is being done by artists today. I really feel that.
mm.
Like I love the art heroes from the past. Don't get me wrong. I love the
Yes.
Sargents and Soroyas, the Zorns, and all of those. It's fantastic. And we do tend to put these guys up on pedestals, but the access that we have now to each other and
Mm,
to this community as a whole, I think it's causing art to become better. This particular
mm,
um,
mm.
type of art. And so I found it really
Ye-
interesting, the way you put this on your website for this New Salem Museum, a stronghold for contemporary realism.
mm, mm,
Tell me about this. Tell me about your museum and your role in that and what that's doing because I like the way that's put. It is a stronghold. I think I'm really encouraged by what's happening in realist painting today. I just got
mm,
shout out to Chris Fornatero, paint coach. He sent me a reel on
mm,
Instagram. I
mm.
think he was trying to drive me up the wall, and he did. He sent me this modern art post, and it's just kind of like it didn't say anything with it, but
Yeah.
I imagine he's thinking, "Hey, dude, check this out. This will ruin your day." And I just
That'll
texted
do
him.
it.
I texted him back, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, not my circus, not my monkeys, but the type of work where we're taping bananas to walls." Okay, so
Yes.
there is a particular art world. I don't even focus on that. I focus on the realist painting that's happening today. So when I saw
Mm,
this on your
mm.
website for New Salem Art Museum, I was like, "Yes, my man."
Yeah.
Tell me
Yeah.
about the
Definitely.
Stronghold and what you guys have going on there.
Sure. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, so it can always look greener on the other side of the fence, right? I mean, we all adore what you're doing. You have such a big following, and that's so respectful. I think that what you've done is incredible. You've allowed so many people to have access to good teaching. So, uh, kudos to you for just building
I'm
what you've
trying,
built.
bro. I didn't go to an
Yeah.
atelier though, and I want to ask you about that too.
All right. So and so then the kind of the world that's happening now in comparison to what has come before us, one of the things that I rejoice in, that I think I've kind of always just I had a belief in this, I guess, is that art will somehow kind of manifest itself in a way that is still fascinating in every generation. So the reason why we resonate with it so much now is because it's totally of our time. And so, when we look at a 19th century work or a work from the Renaissance, even though it's technically brilliant, it's in some ways it's not speaking our language because it's not our day to day. We live with phones and TVs and all these things, right? So with the kind of art that's now managed over the last, several decades to kind of get its foothold into the mainstream, thanks in large part to social media, because it was the voice, of the people, not the gatekeepers. That the technique is allowed to then kind of come back full circle, and you are starting to see master artists again, because the payoff is such that people will, excuse my language, but they'll bust their ass to get to the top, and that's what it takes. Back in the old day, it was, you had the patronage system, and they were fighting for the big commissions from the church, and or in the 19th century, the salon, etc. It would make their career. But now it's kind of like people are using the vehicle of painting and the technical capabilities to kind of garner the attention of the public, to kind of launch them into the limelight, and they have to work really hard to outdo the next person. So we're in a really cool time because a good art is finally here again. I mean, it's never gone anywhere, but like everywhere you look, people are doing incredibly good painting. And so then that now comes to the role that we're playing here in Massachusetts, in Western Massachusetts, at the New Salem Museum and Academy. Is I connected with a family who was passionate about art collecting, and essentially kind of let them in on the world and kind of pitched a vision of what was needed. And they were very enthusiastic about it, because most times you'll have all the artwork in a private collection. So all of this stuff that's been happening over the last several decades, it keeps going back into private collections. So the public doesn't have access to it except online, which is okay. I mean, it's done a lot to help kind of push it forward. But I do think that because art is a tactile, it's such a physical thing, painting, particularly sculpture, that you need a brick and mortar. You need to be able to come see all these artists kind of coexisting in the same space. And so that's what we've created here, by the generosity of the Barletta family. So.
It's amazing. Tell me about this space. So I just want to describe for people listening. Michael right now is coming to me from the museum, and he's sitting in this looks like a central kind of, main teaching area, but it is beautiful. The room is gorgeous, high gable ceilings. You've got these awesome picturesque columns behind you, and then this really wide open space with the easels around. I can see a stage just over your right shoulder there, where I imagine you'd have a figure posed, and then there's a couple of paintings I'm seeing around the place. What an awesome space. So tell me about the complex and the kind of buildings that you have there, including this one. And
Sure.
are you, and also I'd love to know, like, are you bringing students in on a yearly basis as part of the academy? So you've got like a gallery space and the academy space as well. Tell me about it.
Yep. So the building was originally built in 1870. It was used in conjunction with the academy here in New Salem, which is a very small town of like 1,000 people, old New England, historic town. And some of the students that would come from further away would then, it's a boarding facility, so they would stay here. So it's a 3-story building, and what we've done to it is we've created the first and second floor as the permanent collection, and what you're seeing now is the third floor is the academy portion. So as you go up to the top of the building, this is the big, large studio that acts as the academy, and then we have garden space outside. But as it's a very small institution, but the beautiful thing about it is it's a it's a tightly guided kind of vision between artist and patron. So what I knew needed to happen through my experience of studying with Jacob Collins in New York. So when I studied with Jacob, he's had many kind of manifestations of his school, which is like the Grand Central Academy, the Water Street Atelier. And when I stayed with him, it was at his home on 69th Street in Manhattan. And he had his atelier on the bottom floor and his living space on the top 3 floors. And the advantage that we had as students back then was he was a professional artist putting together exhibitions. It was not just an atelier. It was more like an apprenticeship, old school kind of. You would watch the master artist do what he does, whatever it is, and then you kind of like replicate that. And that's what I wanted to try to bring here. Is we have the permanent collection on the first and second floor with some incredible art that they've collected. They've purchased everything. There's nothing on loan. And so what we're going to do is we're going to invite the artists that are in the permanent collection to come teach on the third floor, to kind of continue kind of this idea of that it's alive and well. It's not, you usually go to museums and it's, these paintings are by people who have long gone. But the vision is to continue to kind of celebrate the fact that, no, we can just DM the person, on Instagram and invite them to come here. And it's all like a living tradition. It's not, and it's educational to the broader public, because the people who come, remember, it's a museum, so they can just walk in. So it's revitalized kind of my excitement with the art world, because people are saying like, what, these 20-something-year-old kids can paint like this? Like, they have no clue it's happening, because it's part of that educational process. It's you have to be able to have a space where people can just walk right into and be completely blown away. And that's what this is about.
So there's it sounds like there's some quite young people taking part in this as well. That's kind of encouraging to hear. When I was back in my early 20s, just starting out, this is why I'm like, it gets me for 2 things, mix of emotions here. I'm kind of sad about the fact I didn't have access to something like this when I was coming up. But also it's just so exciting to see like this next crop of artists having the opportunity to just get fully immersed in that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what's going to accelerate this learning, right? And just make it better and better and better. Just going through, some of the paintings here that are part of that, and I'm assuming they're part of that permanent collection. You've got some names here that are just knockout names, including yourself. But we got Jeffrey Ripple, we got Rachel Lee, you got Jeremy Lipking, Travis Schlatt, you've got Julio Reyes, Colleen Berry, Jordan Sokol. Good night. Just some real heavy hitters in the realism space. All of them I'm following on Instagram, and it just every time I see these posts, I'm like, oh, far out. Lipking's done it again. Come on, dude. So
Seriously,
that would be so cool to see, the original collection. Let me ask you a cheeky question here. So when the artists, like when you're inviting an artist to come on board, to exhibit in part of that, these are absorbed into part of that permanent collection. Like, how does that actually work? I'm asking for a friend.
So yeah. So the acquisition process and kind of the curating of the collection is pretty much exclusively done by the missus, so Laura Barletta. So the owner of the entire project. I will help kind of guide, but in all sincerity, she's got an incredible eye, and she
Mm,
buys what she really loves. And I've
mm,
encouraged her that that's what makes the project so unique, is that she's the one calling the shots, and whatever she buys, that's what makes it in. And
mm,
there have been times where I haven't necessarily loved like a couple of the paintings, but pretty much like 95% of the time, everything she's buying, I'm usually like on board with, and just I'm so thankful to be able to kind of sit back and just watch it happen.
mm,
Now there is there's a couple of initiatives that we're doing so that are kind of expanding, so that then I have a little bit more of kind of a say in how the collection is displayed. There's a director's exhibition at the end of the year, which I'll curate, and that has people like Nelson Shanks and Richard Schmid and Tim Lawson. So you get stuff that maybe she wouldn't have purchased, but that I know has to be displayed, right? Um, and Jeremy will be part of that show as well. And then we have the figurative competition, which we can discuss at another point.
mm,
That would just in a little bit. That is basically a way of capturing kind of the energy of what's happening in the realist movement without like you know dictating too much exactly by the kind of curatorial um, perspective, just allowing it to kind of happen organically.
mm,
Obviously we would select the finalists, but it would be it would be different than if she was buying it.
mm. It's interesting. I mean, it sounds like you've struck upon the perfect partnership here and perfect situation to
Oh,
be
it's
able to,
amazing. Yeah,
and the impact that this is so obviously going to have on art worldwide. And now, as you were saying before, when you couple this with the power of social media and getting the word out there
mm,
with great content, with
mm,
great
mm,
posts, now suddenly you have something that's going to continue to feed the next generation, the next crop of people coming
sure.
up, and also
Yep.
make people, like myself, like others that are listening to this, just want to get better by looking at the sheer quality that you're putting out there.
Mm,
I can't understate the impact of this. Like this is huge, man. This is really huge. I'm not
thank
just
you.
saying that. It's
Thank you.
very, very
Yeah.
exciting. So, when you sent me that message when we were talking back and forth on Instagram saying, "Hey, you ought to see what we're doing." No kidding. No kidding. This is really cool.
That's great.
Um,
Yeah.
so I wanna go back to what we were saying before, because I get this question a lot. Now I'm a little bit bitter about my
Mm,
background and how I came up. I suppose I shouldn't look at it this way, but if I
mm,
had the opportunity to study properly instead of just fumble around for a decade before I really found my feet, I think that would have caused me to become, even better. And my goal is always to be the best that I can be.
mm,
I don't feel personally like I'm in competition with anybody else. I used to, but
mm,
I get really excited by what other people are doing now. And I don't feel that same kind of those pangs of jealousy that come up when you see a painting that's just so much better than what
sure.
you could do. I used to go,
Sure.
oh, damn,
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
want to do that.
Mm,
Now I'm just like, awesome. There's another rung
yeah.
on this ladder. Let's keep climbing. But what I'm when I look back at that experience of studying and fumbling my way through, I would have loved to have this opportunity to study it like at an atelier. Now, for anybody listening that is questioning whether they go to art school, because I imagine we're going to have people here listening in multiple camps, whether they're retired and they want to skill up and they want to take a workshop, or they're young and starting out. I really want to dedicate this to people that are young and starting out, just about to step off in that journey. What would be some of the advantages of this atelier system, and how you guys teach at New Salem Academy? What would be some of
Yeah.
those those
Mm.
those points? Because it sounds a lot like full immersion. I mean, if you want to learn anything, full immersion, right?
Well, so yeah, I mean, you hit on some stuff that is, I think that there are some advantages to kind of being in that community when you're going through a formative experience. But believe it or not, when you've been in it, what you realize is the people who are the hardest workers and who like really put themselves out there, which is a lot of, like what has made you who you are is like you constantly like upping yourself, doing better, working harder, trying to see something new. And those are the exact same people that turn into Jordan Sokol. It's like, so you look at the Florence Academy and, it's like Jordan kind of rose to the top of, there's so many students. If you think about Jacob Collins School and, someone like Travis
Yeah.
Schlatt, and, there's so many students that you just never hear of that for one reason or another, they just couldn't take it and they quit painting. And so it's interesting how I think anyone listening, I think the biggest kind of differentiator between someone who's a professional and someone is like the all-in mentality. Like there's nothing else. It's like I'm a professional artist and that's all I ever could be. And that's kind of because a lot of people, like if you can be a doctor, it may be a better choice if you have a wife and kids and responsibilities. An artist's life is really risky and really up and down, and there's just, you got to be like really prepared for it. And that's, I joke all the time because we have this incredibly talented assistant director who's, he's really enthusiastic and he's helped us form a lot of the infrastructure, the new website here, and um, and I joke that, like, you work so hard to get to a level, and then you have to end up doing emails and scheduling, and you create a business and you don't realize it, but all of a sudden you're like an entrepreneur and you have all these things that you have to do, that you're running a business, and it's all from like you down.
Mm.
I mean, you're very familiar with that. I've
I'm a little too familiar with that, dude. Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, I've shied away from it a little bit because it gets a little bit, I think when you're an introverted person like myself, it's hard to manage all these things.
Mm.
Artists kind of uh, they end up uh, having the most difficulty just trying to figure out like how to actually get their talent seen by people or like understood by people.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
amazing stuff.
it certainly is. I mean, there are a lot of things to juggle, and I've had this thought before as well that I've always found very interesting about art in particular. Like when you go all in on art, you
Mhm.
realize how spread across so many disciplines it is. When you're studying art, you have to have some historical knowledge. You have to have a little bit of that chemistry knowledge. If you're painting landscapes, you got to have a little bit of that geology knowledge and maybe a bit of physics
Mm,
knowledge, as
mm,
you're trying to recreate the natural world that you're seeing. I love how it draws from different disciplines in that way. But just by being an artist today, even if you want to self-represent, now suddenly you have to have business knowledge. Now you have to know about sales.
mm.
Now you have to know about emails. Now you have to know about cold calling, social media, websites. The list goes on and on and on. And I've found the last 10 years in particular just to be this journey of continuing to step up to that coal face with my sledgehammer and just keep beating on the thing, fortunately, some things have paid off. Not everything has, but it has been a fight, but it's been quite interesting. But I think having a good start though, the only thing that I've done is I didn't stop. Even when it sucked,
Yeah, yeah,
even
yeah,
when
yeah,
I
yeah,
when I
yeah,
hit the
yeah,
wall, I just
yeah.
didn't stop.
Mm,
But I sometimes look back and I go, man, if there was a better start there, I think that could have
mm,
made a difference. And so I look at these opportunities, that people like yourself are creating for others. This opportunity to come learn, study, but also, heck, just have an opportunity to sit down and talk with somebody like yourself.
yes, yes.
Talk with
Mm,
Sokol, talk with Travis Schlatt,
yep,
talk with Lip King, and just go, how'd you do it? And so,
yes.
in my small way, I hope this podcast helps in that regard. But you know, that start that it's providing is awesome. But let's say you're not able to do the atelier thing. I like what you said about, just having that mindset of working hard. Um, how would, if you had it to do over again and you weren't able to study with Collins, or and weren't able to have that experience, do you think
Yeah.
you would do it a similar way, or how would you approach that today if you had to start from scratch now?
Yeah, I mean, that's it's a difficult uh, kind of scenario to imagine because everything is intertwined and it's so organic and so difficult to kind of decipher because it's like one decision, like meeting my wife, it's
Yeah.
like, ooh, without her I'd be toast, and I would have nothing.
Right.
And so, it's like I lived on 82nd Street and she was bartending on 82nd Street. So it's like you just can't make that stuff up. It's like the amount of, so an example, a painting that I did of my wife, it was called Leaving Home. And it was
Mhm.
for the LA Art Show when I was 25 years old. And she was coming out of, I don't have it on my website, but I'll get you an image if you'd like to see it.
I'd love
Uh,
to.
Yeah, it's she's coming out of an apartment building wearing a dark jacket, and um, that was the first acquisition by the family that owns this museum in
Wow.
2007 in Soho when it was hanging in the window of Arcadia. So that moment that she was walking around Soho with her husband who was doing business in New York, they live in Boston. He was doing business in New York, and a painting happened to be hanging. It's like the odds are, it's just like it's insane how
Yeah.
small the odds are. And
Yeah.
so as much as I want to say like work hard and bust it, and I think that there's things that by working hard and having a vision, sometimes you know things just happen, and you can't exactly control everything. So
Mm.
yeah,
There was something that my father used to say: if you want to catch a fish, you have to have a hook in the water.
yeah,
And one thing that I've tried is just to say, okay, well, how many hooks can I get in the water at once? Let's just pepper that water with hooks, and something's gonna bite, But I hear what you're saying. There are these random chance happenings. I mean, look, I met my wife on a very slim chance, and the way I look back at it now, I'm thinking, no, that was meant to be.
mm,
I am one of these people that think things do happen for a reason, but
yeah,
just like when we think back to it, about how easily we could have not met, but it just
yep,
happened, and that was huge for my career as well, meeting her, because now suddenly when I have this support and this help and this encouragement that I'd never felt or had before, now suddenly I'm able to take those artistic risks as well. But
sure,
it's interesting. I'd love to hear um a little bit about that, if you don't mind, if we're not getting too personal.
mm.
How does your significant other, like, how does that work with do you find it an encouragement? Did that help you grow artistically? Did that help you develop more? Were you able to step out and take more risks as a result of meeting her?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, when we were, she's from South America, so she's an incredibly hard worker. And so, I had mentioned earlier um, that when I got engaged, I was like, okay, that's it. I'm not receiving any more support from
Mm,
my family. And but she, at the same time, stepped up, and she was working several jobs. As I said, bartending. She was a liquor distribution sales to like restaurants in New York City. And so she stepped it up, when I was down. And I think that's important with whatever partnership relationship you have, whatever you do in life, is it's not always the individual that, things happen for for a variety of reasons between, you know, a community or like for instance, a relationship with a gallery. It's like I don't know how much experience you've had with that, but the galleries are oftentimes kind of, I guess in our time, they're kind of looked down upon as like I don't know, maybe not earning their fair share or something because they take such a huge percentage of it's like 50-50. It's a
Mhm.
real partnership.
Wow. Yeah.
Uh, and it, depending on the gallery, it's
Mhm.
60-40 in some cases, and maybe for others it's higher on the side of the artist. But
Right.
um, in a gallery, typical New York gallery, it's 50-50. But what they open you up to is a world that potentially you can't access unless you're putting yourself out there a lot. If you're someone who's just wants to be in the studio and make paintings, that's the whole kind of now responsibility of the gallery, is they're acting as your agent. And so, um, to kind of just speak into that a little bit, one of the galleries that, well, actually all the galleries I work with, but Maxwell Alexander Gallery in LA, what they've done is incredibly uh, cool because his brother is an artist, and so he knows how artists feel, and so he's always like looking out for the artist, and I think
That's
in some
amazing.
cases where, yeah, where the business person may just kind of, grind through the artist and not really particularly care. So
Mm.
there's, yeah,
So the but starting out, like before you really hit it big, Michael, if I could say that, sounds so corny, I know, sorry. But before you really, started to make this work professionally, you mentioned previously just a time that you spent in Argentina. What was that experience like? And you mentioned moving because it was dirt cheap comparatively,
yeah,
to the US. How old were you during this time? How long did you spend in Argentina? Did
yeah,
that fuel you artistically? Tell me about that time.
yeah, absolutely. Oh, I mean that it changed my life for many reasons, but it was the kind of the thing that made me stand out in Arcadia, because I was an American artist who was working abroad. And I think that that was enough of interest for collectors that they really kind of, it, it, it piqued their interest, that I had studied in New York and now I was down in Buenos Aires making these paintings that were, some of them are on the website, not all of them, but they have kind of a very naturalistic feel because I got out of the city and I just put myself in this kind of third world scenario where I was reacting to everything, just coming out of my studies, super eager to kind of try to make my mark and say something new. It was the perfect kind of overlap of um, kind of a innocent energy where I didn't really know exactly what I was doing, and like just a really cool environment. So we ended up. I was 26. We spent 4 years down there. I learned Spanish. I ended up interviewing Antonio Lopez Garcia in Spanish,
Wow.
which is just like, again, I couldn't have done that if I hadn't like taken a chance. I didn't speak any Spanish when I moved to Argentina.
Mhm.
Uh, so, things like that. So I put together two exhibitions for New York in this kind of, it was for American standards, it was like basically like an outhouse kind of garage, weird, because they use cement construction. I don't know what it's like in New Zealand, but uh, in the US, it's all basically lumber and, foundation, just build it really quick. But in Argentina, it's all just, in many parts of the world, it's cement construction, like
Mhm.
cinder block,
Mhm.
uh, and so it felt like I was kind of I had built this garage with these really kind of like it was just, it was weird. It was the perfect lighting. I had made it custom, so it had a section that was like a greenhouse that extended out
Mhm.
of the main structure, and it had two beautiful skylights. And
Mhm.
but people down there thought I was out of my mind. They didn't know what the building was. I was in
Wow.
there all day, and I was in there by myself, and it was like, what? Who is this guy? It was the weirdest thing because they just, down in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, they have a history of really kind of high art with the Teatro Colón and music and whatnot. But fine art, painting, it definitely 20th century, there was nothing. 21st century, it's just now finally, because of the internet, it's starting to pick up. But nobody where I was, nobody had a clue like what a painter was. They would have, you know, so I was just this kind of weird oddball American who was the artist. It was really funny.
It's awesome.
Hmm.
That's awesome. But we're let me just ask from a living
Yeah,
point of view, because that's so much part of what we do as artists is try and work out how the heck to pay the bills. Do you think this could still
sure.
work today? Do you think there are some parts of the world that, if people want to get out
I
of the
do
US?
actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
because
do.
here in New Zealand, I gotta say, man, it is horrendously expensive.
Really?
Cost of living is so high here, man. And I hear it's comparable with Canada. Very high cost of living.
Wow. Yeah.
Gas prices are mental, absolutely mental.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
so yeah, do you think this is a good move? If you had to do it again, would you choose Argentina, or what would be on that list for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, like somebody like yourself, for example, I know your family. Do you have kids?
I have a son. Yeah, 2.5,
Okay.
Hugo. Yeah.
So I know everything is like there, but in someone in your situation where you have such a, you know, worldwide kind of network and you could set up shop literally anywhere. I mean, you could probably buy some place in Italy and, you know, broadcast from like the mountains of, you know, wherever you know what I'm saying?
Wow.
I mean,
I'm gonna do that.
you're already
That sounds good.
you're already in a beautiful place, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
another, you know, but
Mm,
you get my point.
yeah.
It definitely, for people who could do it or who are willing to take that risk, a lot of time what holds people down is family and just the connections that they have. But for me, it
Mm,
was kind of a no-brainer because New York City wasn't an option,
yeah.
and it made it possible to produce and yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
So it'd be a crying shame if I got you on the podcast and I didn't actually ask you about painting. Let's go there. Let's geek out about the
Okay,
painting, about
okay,
slinging paint. I would love to
yep.
hear about your process. But before we dive into that, tell me about the subjects that you paint and what draws you to a subject. Because I gotta say, I love your angle. The way you seem to approach a subject, you capture this moment in time that is just you make it look, it just feels like it's breathed onto the canvas. And so the viewer has this feeling like they're
Mm,
having a moment with the subject, but it's like we can be this quiet observer looking
mm.
in on a moment and sharing that. It's great, this feeling that you've captured. But so I'd love to hear first about your subject. How do you choose a subject? What draws your eye?
Thank you. I appreciate that. So subjects can vary. It can really be anything, but what I kind of specialize in is still life and um, kind of particularly floral painting, which is what I'm known for. It's not that it's the thing that I you know chose to do. It just, you know, going back to the idea about how careers form and sometimes you just end up doing things that you have to. Uh, but figurative art, I love figurative art. That was early on. I did a lot more of that with paintings of my wife's side of the family down in Argentina. I have a couple figurative pieces in the collection here at the museum, and that's what we specialize in. That's what we focus on, is mainly figurative art. Um, but to get into the kind of poetry, I think is like kind of what you're
Mm,
responding to
mm,
in my work is I have a I have a belief that like beauty is kind of it's timeless in the sense that like going backwards or forwards, we can all kind of tap into it if we just think about it or meditate on it or let it kind of affect us in a way that
mm,
you know you can kind of rehash just a kind of painting, which is like 19th century French academic art or something. You can just kind of copy it, and but I'm not talking about that so much as I like to remind people that, you know, prior to color photography, the role of the artist was to share the world with people.
Mhm.
it was literally the only way that people could get an image of the world we live in, and I think we forget that because we're so bombarded with imagery and now fake imagery. We're getting into a new era of
Oh,
of
wow.
that I
Yeah.
yeah that I think that the kind of on the interaction with nature and just almost considering it like a journal, like what you're experiencing is my view of the world. And I think it's important to just kind of own that and say like that may be the only thing we have left moving forward is like if you're interested in it, I can make you this one of a kind work of art that is my spin on how I experience the world. And that may be the thing, because what makes all these other artists throughout history so brilliant and so fascinating to kind of look at, whether it's Rembrandt or Da Vinci or any other person, is that they just were fascinated with life and they were curious. And I think that if you can embed that curiosity into your work without kind of thinking about, you know, you as an artist, or, if you can just kind of, as a student or a high level, painter, if you can just humble yourself and enjoy the process of how fascinating the world is, that's going to come forward, I think, and speak volumes in your work. Because what you're kind of indicating is there's something maybe a little bit more uh, deeper or profound. It's not just the superficial kind of brushwork that kind of maybe doesn't do anything. It kind of looks flashy and commercial. But if you can dig deep and actually let nature affect you and then try to share that with people, I think that's kind of that's going to be the one thing that we still have.
Well, so there's a painting here, and I gotta
Mm,
tell you, man, I wouldn't in a million years consider painting a bundle of sticks. All right.
mm,
But this
yeah,
this is like jaw dropping beautiful. And I'm not just saying that.
thanks.
So looking at just I'm gonna pull it up here on your website.
Mm,
Um and looking at this, like every stick is you feel the three dimensionality and the form there. You feel the texture. You're feeling this painting. But you look at the subject and you're like, it's just a bundle of sticks. And this is why
mm,
I really admire your approach so much, is that you can take something that most people would just continue walking on by. They wouldn't even notice in their everyday. But you as the artist here are going, hang on a second, there's a moment here, you're missing it. And
mm,
by representing it in paint on canvas, mate, it is stunning. And so that's it. I mean, you mentioned poetry. I don't know if I'm particularly poetic. I tend to approach my subjects with that sledgehammer. Um, but there's a quiet moment here that is just, it's quite profound if you just take a moment and take it in. And that's what I
mm.
love about this,
Thank you. Well, Andrew, I have to say, one of the things early on before you had grown on YouTube, and that's why you're very successful, is my wife and I enjoyed watching your videos because she really, really admired how delicate you were with some of like the drawing. Essentially, it was in paint, but it was drawing,
Mhm.
and how you cared about all the different facets of each little rock and leaf. And she gets on me a lot for that because she's like, you need, not necessarily you need to paint like Andrew, but you need to like work harder. And I was like, I love this guy. He's like killing it. Look at what he's, and this is
Yeah.
before,
Yeah.
this is like early on. So it was before like everyone knew who you were.
Yeah.
And it was fun. I mean, because it was one artist respecting another artist and saying like, that's good painting. I remember I reached out to you for a little
I
uh
remember that
like,
now.
yeah, like 12 inches wide or something like that, but
I
phenomenal
remember
little
that.
piece.
And I think
Yeah.
I think at that time I was like, "Hey man, you got to jump on the podcast." And I think for one reason or another, we couldn't make it work at that time. So I'm glad we're having this full
Yeah,
circle
yeah,
moment here.
absolutely,
But
absolutely.
yeah, I do remember that. I've been trying to this is something personally that I've struggled with just as a painter. You know, this is why I admire, your type of painting so much, and others who are able to do this. That tendency for me to, spell out everything, explain
Mm,
everything, overwork and over render everything. Like right now, I don't know if you can see over my shoulder, but I've got this
mm,
painting
mm-hmm.
here of horses in the landscape,
Yeah,
and it's a battle. And I'm really I'm so far I've been really good at not getting out the small brushes, so I'm enjoying
that's
using
good.
more paint. But
That's great. It's
so just what's your preferred me? I mean, obviously you're working in oils. Is it oil on canvas, oil on board? Let's talk about some of the
Yep,
technical
yep,
aspects of what you're doing here.
sure. I mean, it's changed over the years. So early on, it was all on canvas, on linen, and then I really got into painting on panel because I like how you can adjust it quickly. If you want to shave off 2 inches, you can just cut the panel. You don't have to buy new stretchers and restretch it. It's just quickly you can adjust the composition. I love it for that reason. I think it's very archival. It's it's protected from humidity coming into the back.
Mhm.
It's nothing's going to poke it. So I really like panels, and so that's been kind of my main way of painting. And so on the panel, you can do alkyd lead ground, which natural pigment sells, which is really good, rublev. Uh, and that's like the kind of traditional way of going about it. I definitely mix things up, and um, just sometimes due to impatience and liking the ability to have something dry. I've done a lot of like underpainting with acrylic. So I'll do a acrylic gesso, and then I'll do acrylic underpainting and then paint over that, because basically I feel like I can get to like second or third day like very quickly. Whereas in oil painting, you have to sit around and wait for it to dry, and then you can scrape it or sand it. But with acrylic, some of that stuff can happen instantaneously.
Hmm.
So I like that. I think it's actually pretty fun. But you obviously can't go back and forth. It's like put down an acrylic base, and that's
Mhm.
like it. And then you just carry on with your normal traditional oil painting. And that's been really fun for me. I don't do it all the time, but if I am in the mood where I just don't like, so sometimes I'll start a painting, I'll work on it for like an hour of like a burst of energy, and then I just stop and I'll set it aside and come back to it later on.
Mhm.
Um, because it's all wet, it's all thick, wet paint, and I can't do anything to it.
Mhm.
I want to be able to glaze and scrape and sand. Uh, and so what you're seeing when you're looking at my work is kind of, I always tell people that I want to mess it up so much that you can't quite figure out kind of where the forms are actually happening. It's not like all a prima. It's like there can be mistakes underneath there, and it kind of becomes a little bit of a mystery of exactly how I got there, because um, maybe like if I were to paint over another painting or something like that, some of the uh, colors underneath is just it's going to be a mystery, because you're not going to know exactly what that painting looked like.
Hmm. There's so much dimension in these images too. One thing I really, really appreciate is that ground color coming through, and how you're
Mm.
looking through these dimensions of one stroke upon another to that final textured stroke, like that power move at the end of laying
Sure.
down that highlight to just bring
Yeah.
out the edge
Yeah.
of a rose petal. I've pulled up this
Yeah.
beautiful little square piece of some yellow roses
Mm.
with a white rose and a purple rose just beyond. It's really it's really beautiful stuff. What is that color of the ground that you're working on? Do you ever change that up, or is it the same color that you're using throughout?
Yeah. So a lot of times it's not even a ground. I start with a white ground.
Right.
And what that is it's the underpainting. So I'll do um, basically kind of like a translucent dark red, which could be a burnt sienna, or there's another one, I forget the name of it. Is it iron oxide?
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
anyway, a translucent red, and then ultramarine blue. And so basically, I can go warm or cool really quick and keep it translucent, and then I shift into three neutrals, which are a neutral blue, neutral red, and neutral yellow, which is raw umber, burnt umber, and ivory black. So between those warm and cool neutrals, which is the burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, which can get me really far, then I start going on top of it with the neutral um, primary colors, the ivory black, raw umber, and burnt umber. And between those five colors, you can create just a world of a mess, with like atmosphere and dark tones that are opaque or translucent.
Wow, wow. Hang on a second. So hang on. You said neutral blue. Is that your ivory black
Uh,
that you're using as a blue?
yes,
And then the neutral red would be your burnt umber, and
yes,
your neutral yellow is your raw umber.
yes,
Interesting.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
So
yeah.
so so you're going wow. Because this almost reminds me of the Apelles palette in a way.
Okay,
That was later I think Zorn used it, but Odd Nerdrum's painting
sure,
with it
sure,
today,
sure. Yes,
those
yeah,
four
yeah,
colors.
yeah,
It's amazing
yeah,
the range, like when you think about like, well, where's the green, where's the blue, and what you could do with
yeah,
ivory black. It's
yeah,
nuts. Wow,
yeah.
that's so interesting, man. Wow.
So that's it's slightly different than the Zorn palette in the sense that um, what I'm doing is it's not like an underpainting of those colors. It's
Mhm.
just having that as kind of a foundational aspect of it's almost like a formula. You
Mhm.
hear with like modernism and impressionism that there's no formula painting. Basically, it's like, but formulas are just understanding what you're doing.
Mhm.
It's just being a master of your materials. It's not guesswork. It's just
Mhm.
knowing that if I exist in burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, I can go warm or cool and keep it translucent.
Mhm.
If I want to adjust that, I have this other world of neutrals, which are the primary colors that we talked about, that I can start to kind of add and scrape off. And then that just keeps pushing that dimension of neutrals and opaque and translucency, warm and cool, etc. But then it's how it's plays into like you go from raw umber all the way up to cad yellow pale, and it's the whole expanse of the spectrum, and you can adjust that really quickly. So if you want to go neutral, you just dip into yellow raw umber. If you want to go super chromatic, you bust up into a cadmium color. And so it's
Mhm.
floating in and out of your color spectrum comfortably and kind of just swimming in this world of knowing kind of where you're going, what you want to hit.
Wow. It sounds almost like when you start the painting, like the painting process is you just turning up the dial on that chroma as the painting
Yeah,
progresses. You just continue to
kind of.
bring it
Yeah,
out. So
yeah,
as you get into the fully fledged painting, does your palette change very much? Do you keep the same colors out on that palette, or are you kind of
yes,
are you grabbing some different colors? So like, what's your approach to color?
yeah. I'll add color if needed, but typically it's like some of my high chroma colors are like magenta,
Hmm.
viridian. Um, I have cobalt violet, which a lot of people don't use.
Oh, that's
I have
beautiful.
cobalt
Hmm.
violet as a transitional
Hmm.
uh, violet because a lot of people don't actually have like a violet on their palette, which is interesting to me. But I think of the palette as it should have at least the kind of the full range of the spectrum that you want to be able to hit. So, but yeah, I'll add colors if needed, but typically it's about 10 colors more or less.
Wow. That's so
Yeah,
awesome. So what are you working on at the moment? What's on the easel right now?
yeah, yeah. Well, it's springtime here, and so a lot of flowers.
Excellent.
My gallery down in Charleston can basically like sell as many white peony paintings as I give her, which is kind of funny, but it's whatever. That's just kind of how things happen.
Mhm.
So I just this week I've like the last week and a half I've done like five new paintings of that subject matter. Shortly before that, I was pressing into the new work that I had been doing for years that was kind of kept secret. That was for the Western market, which being that I grew up in the Midwest, it was easy to kind of rekindle that cowboy kind of narrative. So that was with the steer wrestling paintings, and that to me was super fun because that was just exploration of a whole new kind of theme of work that I was able to kind of again show a little bit more of the expanse of my capabilities, rather than just being kind of a still life and flower painter. I'm taking a new subject and kind of throwing it against this dramatic landscape. So it's fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Beautiful. So these I saw a couple of these posts come up on Instagram with the steer wrestling. I've just pulled up
Yeah.
the Maxwell Alexander page here. Some of these
Yes.
roses and flower paintings are just jaw-dropping. They're
Thank you.
really beautiful, like
Thank you.
really, really interesting light moments. But to see the power and the energy in these some of these cowboy and steer paintings was
It's
interesting.
fun.
So,
Yeah.
so how big are some of these works? Like, do you like to paint big? It looks like some of them might actually be on
Yeah.
quite a small scale for your floral
They're
stuff. But
small.
have you gone
Yeah.
bigger on the steer paintings?
I definitely that's where I'm headed. I mean, if I've done many kind of solo shows in the past.
Mhm.
I don't do them every year, but I've done a share of my solo exhibits, and for a couple of them, I was like, I'm gonna do these massive paintings, and they're extremely difficult to sell. But being the artist that I am, I was just like, I got to do it.
Mhm.
So for my very first painting, a very first solo exhibition in New York, I did a big wedding scene, which is very, you probably could never find the image. It's not really out there.
Mhm.
But at the time, I had my family all together in my garden down in Argentina, and I was trying to really like kind of hit it out of the ballpark with this huge wedding painting.
Wow.
It kind of was a flop, to be honest, and it took up an entire wall of the gallery. And I did it. I've done that kind of thing several times, and so for this show, I was just like I was introducing the theme, and they were all smaller. It just wasn't gonna. But with that said, I definitely want to go big with it because this is like a theme where you walk up to it and you want to feel it, like the presence of it,
Mm.
and it just has to be big. But I'll get there eventually. I can't do it now. If I did it, I could probably make a killer painting, but it wouldn't sell. It wouldn't sell.
Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I love taking the risk personally, like this painting of the horses in the landscape, which
Yes.
it's
Yes.
a monster. It's 100 inches by I think 60. Um, so it's pretty big. It's getting up there. I have no
Yep.
idea who that's for, but I'm just like, I gotta do it, man. I really gotta do it. So
No, it's awesome.
we'll
I mean,
see.
that's what makes you who you are, and that's like I said, I've done it pretty much for every show I've had,
Yeah, yeah,
and finally, I'm just kind of like trying to be a little bit smarter about it, rather than just kind of
mm,
thinking artistically and saying like I gotta do this big painting.
mm,
Unless you have a market for it, it's really difficult. It's one of those things where.
mm. There was something that you said that I just want to touch on just a little while back. You were saying something about painting your time, and this is certainly something that I see in your paintings. However, yeah, I did
Mm,
see a post, and I think I messaged you about this. It might have been a couple of years ago now, and I saw. I'm sure. I'm 99% sure it was you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
mm,
I could have been talking with another artist. But there were old 19th century photographs, black and white photographs, or something that you were working from, and I was like, dude, where'd you get this reference?
mm,
This is
mm,
unbelievable. Was
mm.
that you? All right.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting what you're saying about painting your time. Kind of reflecting on these conversations I've had with Joe Paquette. He's been on the
Hmm.
podcast 3 times now, and
Yeah. He's
he's
incredible.
he's been saying, dude, you got to paint your time. And I get that.
Mm,
Sometimes
mm,
I feel like this little bit of a yearning, and sometimes
mm,
I'm like, man, why couldn't I have been born 100 years ago?
mm,
But
mm,
like
mm,
it almost seems like there were these like subjects abound, and you could get into these things where people were dressed in a way that it wouldn't look weird if you painted them wearing that. I almost want to
mm.
dress people in 19th century garb and have them, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
look like they stepped out of one of these historical
Yeah.
photographs. But it's
Yeah.
interesting, when Joe was saying, no, no, paint your time, and
Yeah.
hearing you say
Yeah.
that as well. Was that a direction that lasted long for you? Are you still getting into that? How does that jive and mesh with your current artistic approach? Because I find that really interesting, getting into some of the older stuff, the historic stuff.
Well, I mean, honestly, one of the beautiful things about being an artist is, you know, you dictate what you want to do.
Hmm.
And so I love Joe, and he's very outspoken guy. He's very convicted and brilliant. And um, but there's a million ways to go about it. So,
Hmm.
if you specialized in a particular thing, you did it well, and it was historical painting, and you had collectors who loved it, then so be it. I mean, that's just what it is. It's not a bad thing per se. But if we can share our moment and really live in the moment, I think that's what kind of Joe's getting at, is that there is beauty to be discovered right now, whether it's in some industrial complex or a flower or whatever.
Hmm.
There's a way to speak kind of our language now that's going to immediately separate us from other time periods, which is important because um, that you can buy older work at Sotheby's, and maybe we can't, but people can. And so what they can't buy is new stuff,
Mm.
and so we have to create the new stuff, and then they'll want that.
Mm. I like that. I like that a lot. Michael, I'd love to hear what's next for you. I mean, you've got these Western paintings, these steers. Tell me about some shows you might have coming up, some big projects, and what's next for the museum.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to speak into that. Basically, for shows, I'm not doing anything right now. For exhibitions here at the museum, as I mentioned, we have the director's exhibition at the end of the year. We're doing a new rotation of art in June, so it'll be the first time that we put up more of the collection that we own. And then also the competition, which I think you would be fascinated by this, but I have to share it with your audience if they're
Mm.
still hanging on this long. It's 25,000 that we're giving away, and we're curating in a way that we're going to select up to 50 finalists, depending on if we can get 50 good ones. We don't want to just load it full just because we have to. If there's 40 good ones, then so be it. But those 40 to 50 artists are going to be the ones that actually determine who takes away the 25,000 grand prize. So they select, you can't vote for your own, but so if you win, you realize that you just won because all of your peers voted it as the best painting in the show. So
Wow.
that's the whole premise of the competition is 25 grand, and there's only one prize, and the finalists vote in who they think. They get one vote, and they can't vote for their own, and so whoever gets the most takes home the 25 grand. So
That sounds fun. That sounds fun.
yeah, man.
What's the size
Yeah.
limit? Can I put the horses in there? That might be too big.
Well,
Uh,
here's the catch. It can be any size, but what's going to happen is the professional artists are probably going to put in smaller works because of the price, because it's 25,000 acquisition award. So
Mhm.
your painting will become part of the collection, and you'll get 25 grand. And younger artists who are trying to, you know, exhibit with Nick Allin and Jeremy Lipking and Colleen Berry because they're in the permanent collection, then they're going to try to put in something. They're going to put their best foot forward. So they may put in a medium to large piece
Mhm.
because they would be happy to get 25 grand for it. See
Mhm.
how that works? So, like
Mhm.
the people who have been selling paintings all their career, they may only put in an 8 by 10 painting or, 16 by 20 or something, and where they would be stoked to get the money for it.
Mm.
But the younger artist is maybe going to go a little bit more all out and try to kind of, so yeah, it's fun. And it's so much fun for me because I am an artist. So I know exactly how it
Mm.
works. I know what people are thinking about. So to
Yep.
be able to bring this to an international audience and share it with the public
Mhm. Mhm.
is just, it's incredible. It's,
Mm.
it's a dream come true because not only can we exhibit some of the best realism, but we can create a competition
That sounds
to
awesome.
continue pushing forward. And hopefully that prize money will grow if the competition becomes more popular. Then we can give away more. but
Amazing.
it'll always remain one award. That's what I think is fun about
Yeah.
it, is
Yeah.
everyone's fighting for one prize. It's not like, the trickle down kind of like,
Hmm.
you get 5 grand for fourth place. And
Hmm.
I want to take, if we're able to grow it, I want to take all the prize money and put it into one acquisition award.
That's cool. I want to shout somebody out who might be listening
Yeah,
and just tell him, Ben from New Zealand, from Died Studios, Ben Della Barca, get to work, son.
yeah.
Get to work.
That's awesome.
He's
That's really
Ben's a
cool.
huge fan and has been following your work. So I just wanted to tell you that Ben says hi. He
Yeah,
says when he talked to
that's awesome.
Michael, tell Michael I said hi. He's a great
That's
artist
awesome.
here in New Zealand, and he's really going places, and I'm blown away by the quality of his work, and one day very soon he's going to be on the podcast as well. So shout out to Ben. Um,
Nice.
Michael, I have so enjoyed this conversation. It's been a long time coming, and
Absolutely.
it's been awesome connecting with you. And I'd really love to do this again sometime. But let me just say for now, thank you so much for being on this episode of the Creative Endeavor podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me here in the studio, and a huge shout out and thank you to Michael for joining me. Now, right now, follow Michael on Instagram at Michael Klein Paintings and on his website at www.michaelkleinpaintings.com. I'll include those links in the show notes. Check out his phenomenal work and make sure you keep up to date with what's happening with the New Salem Museum Academy of Fine Art. This is an incredible thing that he's working on, and what an opportunity to have as an artist. And I just love how Michael is making this available for others. It was great to hear how this project came to be and some of his vision for what the future brings. It's really exciting, and this is something to watch indeed. Now, if you enjoyed this episode of the Creative Endeavor podcast, please do me a huge favor and leave me a rating or a review on whatever audio platform you're listening on. It makes a massive difference to the show. And also, while you're at it, would you mind sharing this on your social media? Whether that's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is, just share this. Help me spread the word and get this podcast out there to more people. I couldn't do it without you. I really thank you for taking that time and effort, doing me a solid, and sharing this with more people. The podcast is growing. It's getting out there to more and more people. I have you to thank for that. So thank you. All right, I'm going to get out of here and get back to painting. Thank you for spending this time with me here in the studio. I've really enjoyed your company, and I'll see you in another episode of The Creative Endeavor.